We're
Good,
back
good
at
podcast.
Jitters on Brian,
Are we?
right? I'm pretty sure I drove over here twice because I forgot my mic. But welcome to the Creative Refresh. I'm Eddie Garcia, the creative director for Area 956. Across from me, the man. Go ahead.
Ismael.
Oh, that's not across, but whatever. Anyways,
It's me,
yeah, producer,
Content creator.
coffee drinker,
coffee drinker, and
father.
wing eater.
Okay, father, wing eater. Yeah, that's cool.
And then
I like it.
founder, owner, and the guy that does all the dirty jobs,
Oof, Mike Rowe. You can call me Mike Rowe. I'll be Mike Rowe.
Manny Ronhel.
What up?
What's going on, guys?
I'm a little sick, so.
Yeah. I think all of us except Ismail. That
I'm
guy's
good.
that guy's like waking up at 5 in the morning doing jiu-jitsu. So
4 in the morning.
4 in the morning. Oh yeah, because you got to get there at 5, right?
I just wanna start off this podcast by saying I have a quote that I wrote. I didn't write it.
Who's
but
going around
just-
quoting themselves?
just a thought for the day, right? You never stop clapping. It just, the time between claps is just longer. Oof.
Ooh. Who set up my mic stand?
Wasn't me. Like that legit wasn't me.
It was Matt.
It was Matt.
Shout
So did you quote yourself right there, or did you steal that from somebody?
I quoted myself, who then stole it from somebody else.
Because I feel like you would quote yourself. Like, you ever thought that was weird, like creating content, like, oh, if I become the expert that I'm on the podcast and the videos, but I'm also doing everything for my business, who takes the key points from my talks?
Yeah, I have to quote myself.
It's like, dang.
That's actually true.
And I was like, man, I'm not trying to be egotistic, but I'm trying to, like,
Yeah.
create more content. Weird, right? Weird.
I mean, hey, it is what it is.
But I think that'll lead us to today's topic, right? Brand identity.
Yeah,
And
so
why that's important.
Welcome to the podcast. If you've stuck in it with us this long,
Through our nonsense.
If you haven't left,
if you haven't left, today's topics or today's two major questions are why is it important to have a brand identity, and more dedicated to the Rio Grande Valley, what in your minds, in y'all's minds, what does a unique brand in the RGV look like? If you can think of one, like, oh, hey, that one stands out, but why, right? So we're going to talk about that. So hitting up on the first point, what is the importance of having a brand identity, having a very identifiable brand? And the reason that this is important and the reason that this matters is when you delve into the business world, as creatives, we need to look at businesses, and when you start getting up clients and everything that, is attached with it, you need to start kind of having a sliding scale where you start comparing businesses to each other, you start comparing, the creatives to each other and stuff like that. That way you can start determining who stands out. In the same way that most people hate Comic Sans, but oh my God, you can tell Comic Sans apart from almost every other font. And it's not a good thing, but it has its own identity, right? Like you can literally be like, I know that font. And in regards to that, it's the same way in Nike. You have the swoosh, and you have how they're the ones that are spearheading sports and sportswear and shoes, and they associated themselves with Michael Jordan, who was iconic and legendary. And he is a brand in his own right because he stood out, right? His identity was that of success. He was a champion and so many other things. So taking from that, what is the importance of brand identity? When you enter into the world as a creative, you have to start analyzing businesses, and you have to start analyzing your clients and starting to determine, like, hey, when I look at something, why is that relevant to me? Why is that important to me? And why do I prefer, let's just say, we talked about this yesterday, right? Why do we like Crayola crayons versus Rose Art or any of the other ones, right? And you start kind of having this conversation with yourself when you're walking down the aisle. So when it comes to brand stuff, my question to you guys is not only why is it important, but are there any brands that you guys associate with different feelings or different things, and you've identified them with certain things. And I'll give this as an example. I have a friend, I guess, who thinks that Coca-Cola is more meant for meals and Pepsi is more meant as a snack drink. And I know that's weird,
It's kind of weird.
but
That's pretty weird.
yeah, so
for sure.
do you guys have any brands that you've identified with, since you were younger, like, Legos? Like, why do you like those versus the other blocks versus, you know what I mean? Like, in Texas, we have H-E-B, right? So huge, huge. There's H-E-B, like, potato chips, and then there's Lay's potato chips. So why, like, how is one differentiating itself, and why is one, quote unquote, better to you? So I guess start off with Eddie.
Well, that's not where I was taking this at all in my head. But I mean, okay. Well, I guess we could talk about chips.
I mean, you could talk about whatever, but I'm just saying.
I just think. I think before we get into that, maybe make a. You said a lot of words, right? And I think for some people starting off or just getting new, and into this, we talked last week or last podcast about communication and the importance of words and stuff. And it's brand identity. Talking about that is it can be complex, even though it may seem simple to us. So talking about branding is not a logo. It's not these different things. It's like a gut feeling that people say and people get, which is very different than identity, which is identity is the things that you use to communicate that brand feeling, to influence that brand feeling. But it's not necessarily what you say or what you do. It's what other people say about your company. But you can use things to influence that, right? So when we talk about brand identity, we're talking about the things that we are using to influence that brand, that gut feeling. So logos, you talked about Nike, and then the Jordan brand where they use Jordan jumping from the free throw line or whatever. But
and I think with that point, what I was going more for was, I know it's going to be more of a technical conversation, and I'm just trying to give like an overview of why we feel what we feel.
Yeah.
When we go down and, the chip aisle or the Coke aisle or the, soda aisle, why is it that certain brands stick out to us? And you're right? The logos, the colors. Like for me, when I consider, like the Pepsi challenge, right? So Pepsi versus Coke. Coca-Cola has the bright colors, reds, those, red and white kind of Christmassy things that they've associated, right? Pepsi's more muted with the blues. And it's funny because, like, when you look at their logo, a lot of people associated it with the presidential campaign of Obama, and they had very similar colors.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting because they designed that in, like, the same, like, time frame or something. But, again, right, having those identifiable colors and, touching on that, right, a lot of people may not understand this, but they feel it. Whenever you go to a fast food restaurant, there are most of them, yeah, you know where I'm going, most of them, and maybe you can, I don't know if you've heard me say this, they are wrapped in emergency colors. And emergency colors are typically what you associate with emergency, like ambulances, fire trucks, stuff like that. So when you enter at McDonald's, they're bright oranges, bright reds, whites, like things that are really bright and make you feel like, oh, I need to be quick. And when you really stop and think about it, like Burger King has the same colors, more or less, still bright oranges, bright yellows. Whataburger is a little more muted, but still oranges, whites. So when you start considering like, hey, fast food restaurants, they feel a certain way, and most people never really think about it, but it has a lot to do with the colors.
Yeah, and it's communication of, it's communicating some type of feeling so people feel some type of way so they can eat in a certain type of way. Yeah, and it's the same thing, like going back to like the packaging, right? Because that's what it is when you walk through an aisle in the store, Walmart, H-E-B, whatever that may be. Everybody's coloring their packaging in a certain way to stick out on the shelf, so your eye is drawn there. And then we could talk about Coca-Cola and Pepsi. Coca-Cola does have that iconic red and white.
It pops, bro.
It pops, right? Yeah, red pops, especially off of the color of their drink. So, because like their label is a color, but most of the time when it comes to bottling, everything else is clear. So it pops off of that dark brown, right? And then Pepsi, you have that blue, but they're also trying to communicate two different things because Coca-Cola with red is more of an emergency color, but also a warm color that's like making you feel family, tradition, things like that. But then you have a blue that's like real cold,
refreshing,
refreshing, and like this different. They're trying to do the same thing in two different ways, which is important when talking about brand and trying to like make yourself unique amongst everybody else that's doing the same thing pretty much.
So my question, more geared towards Ismael now, like, I know you have a daughter, right? So you have kids, right?
$2.
Two daughters, yeah. So when it comes to, and you see this a lot with kids, when it comes to your kids, do you notice that they prefer a certain kind of something where you're like, why do you like that one? Why do you not like the other one?
Yes. One of them is Play-Doh.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like there's Play-Doh, and then there's like Dollar Tree Play-Doh.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think it's Dollar Tree. But the Play-Doh they see on videos, they see on YouTube, it's got like the yellow cup.
Yes.
But then the one you see at the dollar store's got the white cup.
Yeah.
So they want that yellow cup, dude.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
You mess around with it and it feels the same, but they want that yellow cup.
And that's exactly what we're talking about, right? That identifiable like piece of that company or that product where you're thinking like, why does that matter so much? But to them, I'm sure it's like, oh, it's my whole world right now.
You know what? When you were saying about your friend and the Pepsi and the Coke,
Yeah.
I have something like that with Mountain Dew. And when we were kids, we used to drink Mountain Dew whenever we would barbecue.
There you go.
So I can only drink Mountain Dew
When you
if
barbecue.
we're barbecuing.
Wow.
That's the only way I drink Mountain Dew. I can't drink it just by itself. It's like, nah, this got to be an outdoor barbecue.
And you know, see, my question then goes to, why did that brand association, or why are you identifying it with barbecue when I've never, well, I don't drink Mountain Dew, but I've never had Mountain Dew with a barbecue.
Well, I would associate it with gaming.
Exactly.
Yeah, more so.
Yeah.
So that's
It's interesting.
yeah,
for sure.
an interesting.
And I think it all comes down to, you know, we talk about brand identity being the systems that we use to help you feel a certain way. I mean, we look at Jitters. What's up, Jitters? When they're using their J and, you know, this like whole little like logo ensemble here, like how does this identify the feeling that we're, you know, having here at the coffee shop? And it kind of permeates into the design on the walls and, you know, everything else that's happening here. So what they're doing is they're using a simple, like, you know, clean style on their design that we feel around us. Like it feels clean.
Yeah.
And then
Totally.
the place is maintained really well. So it
translates from the cup.
exactly. And most people know, they don't consider that it needs to go beyond, you know, a cup. It needs to be an experience. And that's just a part of the experience. You know, like if you were to visit a theme park and one of the rides was terrible, like if that was the first one you went on, you wouldn't think any of the other ones were good. So that one piece of the entire theme park could ruin the experience, which is why Disneyland, Disney World, they emphasize, like they go crazy with their characters,
Everything.
with their everything.
Everything. I mean, even from the way that they do their trash system.
Yeah.
Like each of their trash cans are different, but
I've never been.
they you won't ever see someone cleaning their trash cans. It's weird. It's crazy. But you'll never see someone cleaning trash cans because they want to keep that experience that they're having, which is almost a heaven type experience.
The magic.
The magic, the magical kingdom. You know that there's only happiness and nothing bad.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. But I mean, we've talked about that when we've built out brands for people. About like a lot of people sometimes will say that it starts at the door once people walk in, but I think we go as far as
The
you know,
design.
it yeah, the design as far as like it starts when they first hear about your company.
Yep.
And that could be anywhere, at a street, on social media, on the internet, website, whatever. So all that to their even their travel here to the store or the company when they walk in the door, that experience should be the same feeling throughout. Like you shouldn't miss a step, and if you do, it's hard to recover sometimes.
I was in Austin. I'm not gonna say which coffee shop, but I was at a coffee shop, and it's actually, I think it's a chain, like it's not a Texas coffee shop, but they opened up a spot in Austin, and dude, the place was dope, dude. The coffee shop itself was awesome. So had an espresso, drank it there. Then I had a cup to go, and the cup had nothing to do with
Oof.
the shop, dude.
Yeah.
Like there was like a neon green or kind of like a green on the cup. There was no green. Like I just couldn't match the cup to.
Yeah.
I was like how is this happening? Like this is a pretty popular like shop, like a company, a brand. Like how who did this? So
And when you mention like the greens, right, and we think of coffee, we automatically associate it with Starbucks.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about their coffee cups and that iconic logo that they have, that is how you do brand identity. That is how you do branding. An identifiable item is that their cup is a certain color or their cup is a certain way.
Associated color,
Right? So you're associating that with like, oh, okay, anytime, and it's crazy, I don't know if anyone really cares of Game of Thrones, but people saw a coffee cup in one of the episodes, which I guess they've digitally altered now, but whatever, and it was a green cup, and immediately people said, oh, that's a Starbucks cup. You don't know, right? You're just making a guess. But automatically, like, that's already built into our heads as brands, that identifiable color and item and how they've packaged their product, like, oh yeah, that's what that is. And I know we talked about this where it was like crayons.
Yeah, I couldn't even figure out.
It was like, hey, like when you think of crayons, what do you think of? Just off the top of your head, like what kind of crayons do you think of?
what's Crayola?
Yeah, the go-to, and that was the question that I had, like, about Play-Doh. Like, what is Play-Doh? Because Play-Doh is a brand.
Yeah, that's
you
true.
know what I mean? But it's these companies that have branded so well that we associate their name with an object that they sell, but they're not the only ones that sell it. It's clay, right? That's what it's
A molding clay or something. Yeah. So here's a better one, right? Do you guys use Post-its?
Yeah.
Do you know what the hell Post-its are? They're Post-its.
Post-its.
Yeah,
Sticky notes?
They're sticky notes.
Sticky notes.
Yeah. Right? But when you think about it, you're like, oh, I know what a Post-it
I
is.
was actually watching a movie on Netflix. That's kind of new. And the kid is in the counselor's office, and he gives him a sticky note as a note.
Yeah.
And he's like feeling it. He looks at him. He's like, what is this? Like,
Yeah.
he was upset that he wasn't using Post-its.
Post-its, yeah.
He was using an off-brand mark. And going back into why it's important, right?
Yeah.
It's important because we're name, icons, logos, they're all associated with this feeling and this thing of trust and quality. So, we don't go rose art, right? Because there's too much wax most of the time.
Yeah.
Not to be a hater, but let's be honest.
Facts.
Post-its, we go that way because they feel better, they stick better, like all these things, they last longer. We go like, I don't know, like,
so I'll stick with that, and I'll dive more into, because Ismail hasn't really had a chance to say much in terms of coffee. I know you're passionate about that. What is your overall experience that says this is a great place versus where you were talking about, like, why doesn't the cup match the experience that I'm having? And have you had that happen where you were like, man, this was a amazing place, but like you said, the cup, but that one thing could have put them over the edge.
Damn, I've had several experiences at coffee shops. I mean, first of all, like, I love coffee shops. Like, every time a new one pops up, like, I'm excited. If I'm going to a different city, I'm excited to go try coffee, right?
Yeah.
Um, for example, I'm not gonna name any names, right? But as far as experience, it's right from the start, man. Right from when you open the doors, first walk in, like aesthetics.
Yeah.
You know, it's gotta be cool. You know what I mean? It's gotta be cool. Um, but I've been to coffee shops that look super cool, but the coffee's shit.
Ooh.
The coffee is shit. When I have an espresso, I want my espresso in an espresso cup. I've been to coffee shops where they give me my espresso in just a regular 12-ounce paper cup. So, I mean, it's about the experience also. I
Yeah.
want to drink it in my little cup, look fancy, do my picture.
Pinky up.
And I mean, this is just not made for these kinds of cups. So
Yeah.
I've had that happen like at least like 2-3 times here in the valley, for sure.
And would you say that those, I wouldn't say ruin your experience, but like it hits, it makes
It ruined the experience.
Oh, shit.
For sure, yeah,
Okay.
it ruined the experience. I mean, one of those I'm for sure not gonna go back. For sure. I mean, I've gone back since, but I had to meet somebody there. But
Gotcha.
I mean,
So I have another side of that question for you, and you could talk about food places as well, because I know those two things are big for you. But have you ever been on the other side of that spectrum, where like you're somewhere, and the product, which food, coffee, is so good, but the experience and the imagery, the logo, the everything that's built around it, the brand identity systems are just not there, and you wish they were?
I don't think it's happened with a coffee shop yet, but it has happened with a restaurant. You know, where the product is great. Maybe even the establishment is great, but like it won't transfer to social media. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't all match up. And to me, like the companies or the businesses that wow me are the ones that everything looks the same. Their establishment matches the utensils, the cups, the Facebook account, the Instagram account. Like it's all the same. You can recognize the brand or the company.
And I think, having a small pause here, the reason that, branding and identity systems are so vital is Eddie was touching on like branding is the experience that we get, as Ismael was saying, there's coffee places that I love because they do everything right through social media, through the product, through the experience, and that's amazing. But then as soon as you miss one of those pieces in terms of the identity system, and so the difference here is an identity system, as Eddie had said, is the pieces that make you feel a certain way about a product, whether it's the colors of the building, the designs, the products themselves, such as the flavors, all of that stuff, for the most part, is identifiable little items that you can walk through a restaurant or a place and say, hey, I like that, I like that, I like that, I like that. And they're pieces that make a whole. And that whole is that branding, and it's that feeling. And I think at the outset, a brand is what people say about your business.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, hey, what are people saying about how they feel? Like Ismael was saying, like, hey, I like this coffee shop, I don't like this one, because they didn't do this right. That is reflective of your identity system, because you're missing something or there's something you did incorrectly. So I just want to take that break here so that we can talk about that specifically, just so that people can understand it a little bit clearer. But when it comes to coffee shop, when it comes to design and anything that we do in the Rio Grande Valley, and this is our next question, are there brands, and I know Ismael kind of already touched on this, are there any brands that are doing it really, really 100? They're doing it like amazingly well. I know we're at Jitters, and Ismail, that's your personal favorite here. Um, that you can think of other than Jitters that are just hitting it home run every time. And there's a couple that I can think of, but I don't feel like if I think about it objectively versus me just liking the establishment, I feel like they could still do something better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just really depending on like, okay, their social media game's really good, but then they're missing out on this and they're missing out on that. And one of my favorites is PJ Pies, right? They take great photos, they got great food, they have great atmosphere. They've really leaned into this kind of like homemade pie, feeling, even though I think it is locally owned still. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I know it started locally owned. And it just feels really homey, and I like it, and that's where I go get pies. Versus somewhere like a Luby's, which just feels super corporate, even though they got pies.
Yeah.
So it's really that kind of like toss up for me. It's like, hey, you both got good food, but I kind of like the feeling and the experience of when I go to PJ Pies more.
Yeah.
So any places that you guys can think of?
I mean, now that we're talking bakeries and stuff like that, I really like what CC Sweets does with their social media. They're really taking advantage of everything that's available to them.
Yeah.
And I mean, they do great pictures, but I also love that they do stories on the daily. You know what I mean? So they really engage with people. There's there's a boutique for women's clothing. I don't buy women's clothing,
Yeah.
but I like that their social media is fire, and I follow it.
Yeah.
Just 'cause I like to see their content. They do photo shoots, and they do stories. They do all that kind of stuff. And I've been to their place with my wife, and I've done work for them before, and the aesthetics of the shop really matches what they're doing on social media.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So shout out Shop 112.
That's honestly, when you were
That's what I
talking
was
about
thinking
that,
too.
yeah, I was like, yep. And that's even crazier because when you started saying that, that was the identifiable part. That was like, oh yeah, the brand. I could tell who that
Yeah.
was. We weren't even talking about the
Yeah.
name. But as soon as you were like, oh yeah, they go live all the time and they do this, I was like, yeah, dude, I'm pretty sure that's Shop 112.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
And yeah, that is crazy, and that's cool. And like going off that experience or whatever, like when you've done things in the past and like you do something really, I guess, well. I don't want to say really well, but well. Little things like that,
Yeah.
people associate your brand with it, and like that's like building out an icon from our experience, like going places just wearing that icon.
Yep.
And people, hey, I know what that is. That's here, right? That's you guys do this, right? Yeah. Yeah, and that's cool, right? To see that stuff or to hear I did it. For me, man, like I feel like, I don't know, I guess my expectations are really high, right? But I feel there's a lot of places down here that do certain parts really, really well.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen the full package completely.
Yeah.
Myself included, right? Like the brands that I've worked with, self included. But like there's so many places out there that do, I think, the social media game really, really well.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about sweets, right? And I shout out to Casey's.
Oh yeah.
Their Instagram is fire, right? Like,
and their aesthetic inside of their building.
and yeah, I mean, like the pictures, I was like, man, that looks delicious. And yeah, we did a video on that, but it's because it looks so good, right? It's like, man, it's not that we have any kind of favoritism, not even close, but it's just if you're doing it that well as a creative, as somebody who is creating a thing, literally baking a thing, and you make it look that amazing, and then you take, your photography for it, it's amazing. Like we just came out of Spun Puffs, like their artwork, which that's what I'll call it. That man is I mean, those gentlemen are amazing, but one of them is a photographer, and he cares about what his products look like. The labels have different fonts. The experience, he walks you through it. I mean, the entire brand feels so handmade, and then it feels crafted. It doesn't even like like you didn't feel like we were in a candy store or a sweet store, which it's cotton candy. It's literally in the name.
And with them, like if you see their logo, it's pretty clean.
Yeah.
And then you go in the shop. The shop is like clean. You know what I mean? Like
I think his attitude towards everything, because so the logo,
even the way he looked.
Yeah.
The logo that we see on his shirt is not their original logo, and he was going through like a logo redesign.
Yeah.
And to make it feel like what he's trying to communicate, and then his just attitude to everything was just like, yo, we're not done yet.
Yeah.
We're not done yet. It's not complete. I'm not satisfied with where we're at. We're trying to level up. We're trying to move up. And so, yeah, that's one of the people that, like, companies that come to mind when thinking about who's being, like, doing this well here in the Valley.
And I think with the Spun Puffs example that we're using right now, right, when it came to the flavors, right, you guys had to experience that, like you had the pleasure of experiencing that. In your minds, like, did it all feel complete? Like, because you had such creative flavors, creative artwork. The gentlemen were, they were by far amazing. The entire experience in itself, I didn't taste any of the food because I'm behind the camera. But when it comes to that kind of stuff, did it feel like it was a complete idea?
For sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, look how long we stayed there.
Yeah.
I mean, we stayed there
like 2 extra hours.
2 extra hours just because we got lost in
the
experience. Yeah, you had something to do, but like we got lost in the experience and the
conversation.
Family. Really, it was a very family or like community felt place, and there was just 4 of us or 5 of us in that,
And I'll touch on this, and I don't mean to interrupt, but when I consider cotton candy, or at least I'll ask you guys, what is the first thought when you consider cotton candy? Right? Is it carnival?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Is it
party?
Yeah. So it wasn't this like experience that we all had, where it was like, man, this feels upscale. This feels really down to earth. At the same time, this feels well designed. They care so much that all the fonts and flavors and
the shelves were stocked right and
exactly
all lined up. They cared about the little things, the little details.
And they're still trying to tweak the flavors and get it even better.
And that there was just a passion there to be like, like we're not even gonna put it out if it doesn't even taste close to being like what we say is on the label.
And I think one of the flavors that y'all had the pleasure of experiencing, I think he had mentioned that he'd worked on it for like a year and a half or something like that. Is that right?
Oh yeah. I forgot which flavor it was, but yeah, he took that long. Damn, dude.
I mean, consider that, right? This gentleman's been working on something for a year and a half, just so that you could taste it for a good minute or two.
Yeah,
that's crazy, right?
Yeah, that's it.
But now, from like just as what he thinks of his brand, he thinks that it is that valuable to him, that it is that important to get quality, to get that taste, to get that experience just right. And those are the identifiable items of the brand. The flavors, the quality, the texture, the way that he told you not to eat the cotton candy.
Oh yeah, he had instructions for the spicy ones.
And I know we're talking about cotton candy, like I get it, right? But at the same time, understand how passionate we are about somebody doing it right.
Yeah.
So, going back to it, when it comes to having good branding, making sure you have identifiable items in your brand, making sure that, you sit down and walk through it from a creative standpoint, right? It's like, hey, your website, your videos, your content that you're producing as a creative, is it all kind of wrapped in this overall brand, like that's speaking to the same narrative, the same story, the same mission? Is it all kind of going to the same place? Does your font, your logo design, if your business is to be clean, right? If you do clean design, let's just say, does the font on your website represent that? Does the layout on your website represent that? Does the design on any of your graphics represent that? Whenever you do text on a video, like, motion graphics, is it talking about that? And I think one of the experiences that Ismail can, talk about on is this. when it comes to some wedding stuff you've done, have you seen other wedding, productions that they talk about producing it in a certain way? Because a wedding is a certain thing, right? It's a celebration of two people coming together. And they just miss the mark, where it's like, yo, you're using the wrong fonts, or man, I can't even read that, or why the hell would you choose these colors? Have you run into anything like that, where maybe the video's blurry, or?
I think maybe it's like, I mean, it might sound a little too technical, but maybe like the way they do certain shots, how it's not as dramatic when there's something dramatic happening. Just like shot selection, like, I mean, I don't want to get too technical, but just certain ways, certain movements you can do with your camera to kind of bring attention to the moment. Like, I don't know if it's experience or inexperience, but I mean, some people just don't get it right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they kind of miss an important moment to kind of add more to the story just by shifting a certain way or just by zooming in a certain way. But yeah, I definitely see that.
And you see, it's interesting because you're saying, like, I don't want to be too technical, but at this point, this is what it's about, right? Sharing our expertise and our knowledge. But I think that's a really good point. Like these little things that, maybe the couple that's involved, they don't even notice it. But because you're in a position where you're like, hey, I've experienced all that. I know what to look out for. And I think we come up with this when it comes to design, where it's like, hey, man, like, that's all great. But the kerning, the spacing between letters, like, just a little bit. Just make it closer or make it further or just adjust it. And that small adjustment, like you were saying, it could be more amazing than what it already is. And it's, again, going to Spun Puffs, same attitude, right? They're like, man, our flavors could be a little bit better. And I think that's what makes us experts, or at least us, that's what makes, as a collective, we become experts when we care about those things, right? Because we're caring about the brand and the feeling, but we have to pay so much attention to, is the typeface, is the picture, is the video, is the thing that, are these elements perfect? And they'll never be perfect, but are they amazing in their own right? You know what I mean? And I'll reference this to sports because I know, Eddie, you're our sports guy here. A basketball team has actively, 5 players on the court, right? And I know, Kobe Bryant and all that stuff. Yeah, that's, sad. But Kobe Bryant played and he was amazing, but he wasn't winning championships by himself. Not until he, surrounded himself with an amazing team. Michael Jordan is amazing, but he wasn't winning, championships by himself until he was surrounded by an amazing team. And I think that's the same idea. When you think of an overall, brand, it is the culmination of elements in the same way that, a sports team is a culmination of players.
Yeah.
Right? So if you have a great logo, that's awesome. Ismael was talking about this. You go into a coffee shop, man, they can have a great first experience, but then their product is not good. And you sit there thinking like, man, that could have been so much better, or I thought it was going to be so much better, and it's just a disappointment. So,
yeah, well, R.I.P. Kobe Bryant. But
R.I.P.
I don't know. That was a hard one to sit through, bro. Because when Kobe Bryant tells you he's gonna score 80-something points, and you don't even have to stretch before a game, he might win a championship by himself. But I get where you're getting at. Yeah, it's branding is this big umbrella or this full pie, and then you have these elements that are slices to that pie that make it up. That even though you can eat by itself, sometimes it's just better to have a full pie, right? It looks more beautiful. And then going off of that, I guess, would be like, I was thinking, we were talking about like these design elements and aesthetic and stuff, but I was thinking about like our customer experience as far as like the first person that we interact with, like at a coffee shop, or even that's important to a business. Like surrounding yourself with a good basketball team, with good other good 4 players, or whatever that may be. Because if like we came in here and they took forever to get our order, if they didn't, they weren't friendly, or like if they were having a bad day or whatever, that would de-escalate our experience here. And it's like, oh man, everything looks so good, feels so good, everything's like speaking to me, but the staff is just shitty. I was thinking that was popped into my head too, and like how consistent everything has to be across the board underneath the umbrella, or you lose a step and you're kind of just
adding to that. I mean, here for example, I mean, we're jitters. When I walk in here, me and Matt will talk for like 5 minutes, and then I'll order my drink. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like at some of my favorite shops, I'll order a drink, I'll sit down, and I'll talk to this whoever's serving my drink. And the not so favorite coffee shops, like, they don't have that kind of friendly environment. They don't have that kind of chill vibe. And there's a coffee shop that recently closed down in McAllen. They didn't even have outlets for your computer or whatever. It was like, get your coffee, sit down 5 minutes, and then get out. They don't want you to chill. And I don't know if that's what did it, but it didn't work out for them. So,
You know, and I think when you speak to something like that, like, what other people have to say about your business is your brand, right? That's what we're going with, and that's what we feel is the truth. When you sit there and say, like, they don't even have outlets for your computers and stuff like that, it makes me, who's never been, feel that, like, oh, I don't want to go there. So by them just not accommodating these little things, you are just telling me that, and it's already like, yeah, I don't want to be a part of that.
That's just a bad business decision, because
But it's
but I'm just saying, like, because, like, why would you want someone to leave when they can stay there, work on their stuff,
and order more.
Order more, right? So yeah, that's just weird. Like, because when I think coffee shop in general, it's like, I'm gonna go
Chill.
somewhere to chill, hang out with friends, talk, or work on stuff, or both. So, like, no outlets. That's
No
like
outlets, bro.
that's like not having tables. It might as well just be a little shack.
So I have a personal experience that I ruined. I ruined a lot of experiences for people, probably their first times. And if nobody's been, in Michigan, there's an island called Mackinac Island that hasn't had any automobiles in it since, I think, its inception. So it's probably had 2 automobiles in the history of it. It's a small island, whatever.
He drove a bunch of cars over there.
It wasn't that. That would have been awesome. We went to a restaurant, and they had a jukebox, right, where you put $1 in and play whatever. And I was younger, so I was just dumb. Very chill, very, like, coffee shop-esque. But in the jukebox, they had Limp Bizkit. And me always being a jokester, I was like, yo, I'm going to spend $1 playing Limp Bizkit 4 times. To the point where the second time it played, they unplugged the jukebox. And I thought, wow, I was ruining people's experience by playing music. And I thought about that, and I was like, you know what? It's so true, though. When I enter an establishment, now that I think of it, now that I'm older, but when I think about it, like, if an establishment has super loud music and I can't have a conversation with somebody, I don't want to be there. If that was the whole point of it, or if they're playing music that doesn't fit the atmosphere, you think of Olive Garden, and there's always, like, Frank Sinatra playing, or some, like, jazzy, like, Italian music. It fits, right? That's part of that identity. The music that they're playing, it goes with the food. It's a cohesive experience. It's awesome. You think of Italian restaurants, most of the time they have that kind of stuff. You wouldn't consider an Italian restaurant playing Limp Bizkit. So, when you well, I mean, unless it was Fred Durst.
Yeah. But in the same way, I mean, going back to us working on a tattoo shop, how the aesthetic was very clean and very, like, different, to a point where we had to tell some of our tattoo artists to, like, wear headphones when they tattooed, because the music that they wanted to play over the loudspeaker wasn't adding to the experience of what we were trying to portray. They're a great artist, but
people have their own musical taste. Yeah.
Yeah, and whatever inspires them is fine. There's nothing about that. But to me as a business owner is like the experience is for the customer and for the brand that we're trying to influence. And then I need you to do your job right, but simple fix, wear earphones and like we'll figure it out. But things like that, little things like that are important to add to the vibe and to the experience for sure. What's up, dude?
It's just like,
I was just trying to imagine what that tattoo shop looked like.
Oh, it was black and white.
It was cool, man. I mean,
I'll show you pictures, man.
Yeah, we got plenty of pictures.
It was cool. It really was.
I got a tattoo about 2 years ago, and the place I went to had that clean kind of vibe or whatever, and it just makes it feel like, okay, I'm not gonna get an infection if I get my tattoo done
There
here.
you go.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Clear windows, big windows, and all that kind of stuff.
And I think that's more to that point, like that is what the elements essentially, become that this overall brand where you're like, man, they clean the floors, which means that they probably take care of the needles, which means that I probably won't get an infection, which means I could probably get a safe tattoo here. And that's something that people do in their heads that, like we were talking about before when we talked about process. Like a lot of people do these like extra steps in their heads to rationalize things before actually making a decision. And that's definitely one of them that you wouldn't even really think that you do, but you've already made all those like jumps.
For sure.
And that leads into that feeling, that brand, that gut feeling of like, I feel safe here.
Yeah.
Versus if you walked into a tattoo shop and you saw a little bit of blood on the floor, you'd be like, well, everything was okay up until I saw that, and I just don't know anymore.
Yeah.
Everything could be perfect except that.
I think even like, I don't know, like for me, I have a few tattoos, but I don't know, it's just that experience of seeing like tattoo shops that have like too much like words on their front windows and like neon lights and like real grungy like style, which in my head, okay, that is the typical like stereotypical classic tattoo shop, but that doesn't make me feel good inside about getting a tattoo there.
They're
right?
using rusty needles.
Yeah, like this old school style, which is not, I mean, there's rules, they have to be a certain way, but I would just feel better.
But would you say that you associate that to like a biker style or a more like, like punk rock, like
like this pirate, like free,
there you
like,
go.
Yeah, definitely. But it's just not for me, because I've been to a lot of those places, like just to be, not to get a tattoo, going with other people, and like even just me, I wasn't even getting tattooed. I've had this sense of like being uncomfortable, and like when we did ours, like we wanted to have a different demographic. We wanted not to have to haggle with prices. We wanted a middle to upper like class people that were gonna associate the like quality with art and appreciation. But we wanted people to feel comfortable. We wanted people to like be able to go and hang out and like not feel like they need to like leave, but also like if I'm okay with getting a tattoo here because it's gonna be clean. They're gonna appreciate what they're doing. They're not just trying to get you in the chair and get you out, like all these things. But yeah, man, those experiences of just being there with, like, I always like never wanted to get a tattoo because I was like, nah, I don't know, I don't feel comfortable until we had our own. And I got to experience the other side of like tattoo shops where there's other places, especially down here, that are on the opposite spectrum of that, of the grunge, the neon lights, where they're like, even though they have like certain art that's grungy, the aesthetic is like cleaner and more comfortable.
And I think when you touch on that, right, like you had a feeling of what you wanted, or you had an idea of the feeling that you were trying to convey through the business, because you've already been to so many other establishments that did it poorly. In the same way that I believe this, if Ismael opened up a coffee shop, it would probably be one of the best coffee shops. Because at that point, he's already tried all of what everyone else is about and where they're missing steps.
Yeah.
So what he's done is he's compiled this like brand feeling, and now he knows I need a font that looks like this. I need a design that looks like this. And he's made a checklist, whether he knows it or not, now that he walks into other coffee shops where he has his ideal coffee shop in his head. In the same way that when we made the tattoo shop, you knew what your ideal tattoo shop was. And a lot of business owners need to do that, right? In the valley, regardless, wherever. When you consider your brand and what you want people to feel, whether it is a restaurant, whether it is a tattoo shop, a coffee place, whatever it is, you need to create a checklist where it's like, I've been to places and for some reason they're missing these things. And at the same time, this is basically do your own research for sure. But when it comes to these single elements of, hey, the cup didn't fit the coffee shop establishment's whole motif or design, or the tattoo experience that I had, there's, something on the floor that just didn't look right, or it was grungy or pirate feeling. Like those little things, whether, businesses like it or not, mean customers leave. And at the end of the day, your business only succeeds by having people buy stuff. Yeah. And if you're not having those little things addressed, for what reason, right? Like if it's because, I don't think it's valuable or important or what, like your customers are literally leaving because they don't feel safe in your shop. Your coffee quality isn't up to par. And it's like, dude, you can argue with me all day, but I'm the one that's buying your stuff. Yeah. You should at least hear me out. And I think as creatives, we do that with our creative work for sure. Like, hey, we work with clients all the time. I'm sure, Ismail, you work with people to do video all the time. But as businesses, you need to sit down and be like, okay, what about my brand is missing? What is an element that I can make better? Whether it's my social media game, my photography, my video content, right? My design, my flavors. Like there's so many little things that people overlook when they're, full steam ahead. Very much like we hung out with Wing Barn. They care about every single piece of that food that comes out. And they're thinking about like, okay, I need it to be consistent, to the fact that I believe he said that they have a main kitchen that feeds to their 7 restaurants.
Oh, yeah. On the sauces. Yeah.
On the sauces, because they don't want inconsistencies. Think about that. They have one place, one version of the thing, because they don't trust 7 places doing it the same way. For sure. It's a recipe, dude. You can measure and whatever. It's like, nope, I don't feel it. It needs to be this way, because they care that much about what the flavor says about their brand. It's like, damn, that's impressive to think that they're going that extra step. And then you consider Starbucks. And then you consider Luby's. Then you consider Burger King, McDonald's, like franchises. They're all doing it differently. I know for sure I've been to one Taco Palenque and another Taco Palenque, and one, well, it didn't taste the same. And I sat there thinking, like, why not? It's like, because they're preparing it differently. I actually have a favorite Taco Palenque. It's the same damn.
I think it's the same thing with Whataburger. Like,
yeah.
Oh, I know this one. Go to this one.
Yeah. But it's that experience. And then you sit there thinking, like, damn, like, I can't believe that one is better than the other, even though they're at the same damn store.
Stripes Tacos also comes to mind.
Yes. 100%.
Yep.
There's some places that have made it with like less potato and egg, and I was like, yo, isn't there like a scoop you're using? Like, what is this?
Some places spread the beans like they're supposed to be spread. Some people just put them in the middle.
I will say, since we're talking about tacos, right, let's do something practical. What do you think a taco shop or a taco cart or business could do to stick out here in the valley, brand identity wise?
I think you'd start with flavors. You have to start with flavors. Because if you are just another, like, fajita, whatever, like, if you did something that was, and taking inspiration from tingi tamales, right? If you did something that was just a little different, where you add a little bit of hot Cheetos or a little bit of like valley like thing that made you stand out, and it doesn't need to be like the most amazing flavor, it just needs to be different so that people can go try it, and then you can hook them on something else, which we've seen, Tingy has done. Fuck, there's a couple places that have done. I know PJ Pie's had a really like blueberry and something else pie where I was like, I don't want to try that, but it sounds pretty delicious. And then I looked at their pecan pies. You know what I mean? So I was like,
I think with tacos, I mean, yeah, it's gonna taste good, but I think it's kind of hard to find some way to stick out with the product, because I mean, I down here, I guess, because people like their tacos a certain way, and then some people think like, well, if you put cheese, that's not a real taco. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
100%.
So it's like you gotta be careful what you add. Like I did a video with Taqueria La Herradura, and their food is very straight up, but they're known for putting chingos of meat in their tacos. So that's kind of like their thing. You know what I mean? I have an aunt that started doing like tortas, and she's starting to sell to friends and stuff. And from what I heard, she wants to do her own taqueria. So I was thinking, well, what can she do to kind of put her own spin, but keep it classic, but also stand out?
Yeah.
So it's kind of tough.
And so like that would be my idea. Like I think it's hard to do the flavor thing. I think you need to have something that's different that stands out on your menu. But like when you think tacos, you think certain tacos. Like you don't necessarily think like, oh, I'm gonna go to this place and then like I can't get my pastor, or like you can't get these certain things. So I mean, I guess aesthetically, because I feel like every place, Mexican restaurant for the most part I go to, is like there's no common theme. It's just kind of like whatever. It's like second. That's like a second, like an afterthought. And so I was just thinking about things like throwing things around, of like what identifiers can we do to like, would we be able to do for a taco place like to stand out here that still has that traditional feel, that traditional taco like experience, but like we're adding to, because I feel like going back to, there's always that, I always find good tacos, but the rest of the brand just isn't there.
Yeah, the rest of the menus like miss.
Just like in general, like their logo, it's just like whatever, and they are like very clip arty and like that.
But I want to touch on that though, right? Because it goes back into this conversation we had with Joey or John, clients of ours. And when you are a professional chef or a cook or when you've niched down to the thing that you're good at, and a lot of these taco places, they're amazing at making tacos, but that's what they're good at. They're not good at design. They're not good at branding. They're not good at strategy, right? So I know we're hitting on them saying like, hey, you guys could do this better, but it's not what they're good at. And it's very hard to be a well-rounded, unless you're working with creatives like, Wing Barn was, where they were like, hey, we have our own marketing person who's been in marketing for years and was at NBC. Like, that's awesome. And then you consider that and you're like sitting there thinking like, that person knows how to make sure the branding and marketing is on point. A mom and pop shop doesn't necessarily know that. And it's our jobs as creatives to jump in and say, hey, hold up, we can level you up. But I think analyzing a business, analyzing what a dream taco shop would be, and making sure that we have some kind of comparison, like I was saying before, Ismail would be the perfect person to create a coffee shop, because he knows what's missing and what can be, essentially like made better. When we think of those kind of taco shops, like, yes, they're missing out on a lot of stuff, but it might not always be that they're doing it purposely.
Oh, I'm not saying that.
No, and I'm not suggesting you are. I think that just a lot of people, hopefully we do have people that listen to this. Just because your business is missing these things, it's not your fault, right? Like, we get it. you just don't have that creative vibe or that creative idea.
Yeah.
And it's not your fault because you're busy caring about the business. We're just saying that at some point, there are other aspects in your business to make it better in terms of getting more recognition in your audience, reaching more people through your branding, marketing, strategy, whatever it is. Like, that is the other side of the business that doesn't get, and we've seen it, enough attention. We've reached out to plenty of people where they're like, oh, my business needs this and this, but I'm not willing to pay. It's like, but you're willing to pay $5,000 to make sure you have the best kitchen, or $10,000 to make sure you're the best something or other. It's like, dude, like, I'm not saying don't do that, but also understand, like, the other side needs to be taken care of also. But they get into this mode, and I know because I've talked to them, right? They get into this mode where it's like, well, I have tunnel vision, and all I care about is making money. All I care about is, okay, I have $100 to spend on marketing because I'm trying to keep my business open. And it's like, dude, like, it's not your fault that you're not knowing better. Like, my job is to educate you. This podcast is to educate, people.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like, what we consider important, which we understand why it's important, they may not see the value in it. And it's our job to say, like, hey, when it comes to branding, your identity systems matter, because when you walk into a coffee shop and you walk out with a green cup, you get confused, even just for a second. Or when you walk into a coffee shop and the flavors just don't hit. Like, you have to take that into consideration. That's your product, and that's a person that would be, what do you call it? A zealot, or what is the term? Like, somebody that's pioneering or not pioneering, somebody that's talking about your brand, right? So you have somebody who's championing your brand and saying, hey, I really love this.
Possibly a true fan.
Yeah, exactly, right? So they need to consider that, hey, at the end of the day, in my mind, I always say it's not your fault, because a lot of people just don't think about it. And they just sit there thinking like, oh, I just got to make sure, like, I got too many things happening. It's like, dude, I get it, right? I completely get it, because as creatives, we're doing like 90 things at once also, and some things slip our minds. But it's our job to walk in and say, hey, you know what? I noticed that your logo, I noticed that your branding, that your fonts are, like, I can't read some of the stuff that's on your menu because I just can't read the font. Or I noticed that, like, outside on your building you have certain pricing, but when I walked in it was more expensive. What's that about? I've seen that a couple of times. And you go into a coffee shop, flavors are weird. You go into a tattoo shop, it's dirty. Like, all of these little things feed into this feeling of like, hey, you know what? But when we go in as creatives and say, hey, your company or your business can do better, we have to make sure that we approach it from a standpoint of not wanting to change everything, but to help them. And that's one of the things that I know we've experienced. It's like, people don't want an overhaul all the time. They want you to come in and be like, hey, I want you to just help me. When you walk in with this mentality of like, hey, I noticed that all of your shit's broken, right? Your fucking your coffee tastes like bad. Your logos are trash. You're like, dude, if you walked in and said that, they just kick you out. They would never hire you. You know what I mean? And I'm just trying to make sure that people always have this consideration for the other side. Yeah. Right? So, any comments to any of that?
No, I mean, you're right? Like, as far as, like, it's always a balance. And I think even in what we do, right? Like, it's not just about the creative for us. I think it's, like, strategy on both sides, right?
Yeah.
Like, how can, like, we just, or me personally, approach it in a creative way of how to essentially bring back money and have all this pay for itself, and more. And it's just, going forward, like, for, like, that message is like, bring value to yourself and to others, but like learn how to communicate it in a way where they understand that you're just trying to help them and you're
elevate the brand.
Yeah, there you go.
And just to remember that it's both and, not either or.
Yes.
And in the same way for everybody that's graphic designer, photographer, videographer, just one thing, start thinking about the strategy part.
Yeah.
You know, how can you, one, learn yourself on that way to bring more value and to communicate that, but like you're, in the end, you're going to be more valuable if you can do more than just produce one piece of content. And like,
Yeah.
like if it's a video, like how can you help them realize that, you know, yeah, one video is great, but like we can do this package instead, where it's like we're breaking down this piece of content that you can use for a month instead of just one day.
Do like a campaign or something.
Yeah,
like that,
something like that.
And it makes sense,
Yeah.
right? I mean, over the longevity of a business, you know, we just we just spoke with Wing Barn, bringing them up again because they just they're celebrating 10 years in business. When you really stop and think about it, right? You're not around for 10 years by messing up. You're around for 10 years by knowing what the business is and having a business strategy. But at the same time, as creatives, when you do a single piece of content, that single piece of content is not going to last 10 years.
No.
A strategy needs to be wrapped around that 10-year life cycle of the business.
And just as having a business plan, you know, like before, for the most part, if you're asking for money from a bankers or lenders, you want this business plan, right? And in the same way, your strategy should follow that, where like you have this plan for the year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and also that it's a living, breathing document on both ends, right? Not just what your business is doing, but like your social media game, your digital strategy, creative strategy, that it's a living, it's changing as you change, it's growing as you grow, and you're constantly reviewing it and making sure that the different pieces of the puzzles are there and they all kind of fit together is important. I think we lose sight of that too. Like we work on the business plan, like when we enter just so we can enter the door, and then we can just like throw it away.
I mean, I'm always in consideration of what a business's goals are. And I think from our standpoint, we understand creative work and what it takes. And it always becomes this conversation of, not that we know better, but because of our experiences and our expertise, that we understand that a better video, right, a better produced piece of content could deliver your message in a better way. And it's at the end of the day that feeds into what your overall business goal is, which is to generate more revenue in a certain way, right? It's like, hey, I want more people to buy this product. It's like, okay, cool, it'll be this. It'll take this. And yeah, sometimes I agree that sometimes we'll look at it in a certain way that maybe they're not the most receptive to, but at the end of the day, the reason that they're not the most receptive to it also could be that they don't see it because they're not creatives. And that is definitely a harder sell at some point, because there's been plenty of situations, and I'm sure Ismail's experienced this as well. You'll reach out to somebody, let them know the pricing, start having a discussion, and then you start sharing your ideas, and they're like, oh, well, no, that's not what we wanted. But that's what you need, right? From my perspective, you're still shooting, 480p quality video. Like, you got to update something, man. You stop using your phone for
Stop using your phone.
Yeah, there you go.
That's a big one. There's a shop in McAllen that I did some photography work of their pastries. They have a great product.
Yeah.
They have an amazing product, right? But I was like, y'all need to step up your Instagram, your pictures. Like, this is like awesome, but with the yellow lighting, grainy phone picture, like, it's just not translating to what this really is. You know what I mean? So we did a photo shoot, and I mean, everything looks amazing. Now their Instagram looks badass, and now you can kind of appreciate more what they're making, But the good thing is they knew they were screwing up. You know what I mean? They knew they need the help.
And I think a lot of businesses know. They just, and we had this conversation with Wing Barn, they just don't ever have a creative who actually knows their side either. Because we as creatives kind of like, oh, well, we know what we're doing. Like, I know, but when communication, you don't know how to talk to a business owner, you're shooting yourself in the foot. You don't actually know what a business needs to do. Like, sit down and talk to them. Don't sit there thinking you have the answers. Like, it's supposed to be about working together and elevating their business. Not saying like, well, I'm better than you. And I was like, dude, that's not going to get you business as a creative. And that's honestly a very dangerous place to be as a creative, because you're never going to find work.
Yeah. And I think it's like getting to that place in our own lives, like upgrading ourselves to get to that mentality. Because I know for me, it's a little bit easier. Like, even though I love being in community and talking about ideas and creative, it's easier to be like design and be creative isolated by myself. And that's a big thing. But that kind of leads to like it being awkward or being like not as social with people in group, and especially when you're meeting a customer or whatever. So it's like getting to that mentality, and then also like practicing that to being social and being able to communicate things, and then not going in to these conversations with the mindset of like, oh, I've already researched everything, I've looked at all their stuff, I know what the problem is, when you haven't even heard like what the problem is. Like, you're pre-diagnosing someone and trying to give them meds for a headache when they twisted their ankle, you know?
And I think this pours back into what we're talking about, where it's why is having a solid like brand identity important? Creatives are walking brands, right? What you wear, what you say, how you're translated, that is you as a brand, right? Whenever you're talking about like, hey, I can deliver, like, you're selling yourself. Do people want to buy your brand? Do people want to buy what you're selling? And if the answer is no, there's part of it you need to fix, because whatever experience that you're having with people is not there. So look at your own identity system, right? Whether it is your communication, and if that's a problem, how you're being perceived, what your positioning is. If you're arrogant as hell, nobody wants to talk to you, right? And if you're not an expert in your field, it's okay. We've walked into conversations where we've literally said, we don't really know a lot about this field, but we have a lot of creative ideas. And they sit there and they're like, oh, okay, like, that's amazing, awesome, whatever. And they still talk to us. Okay. So whenever you consider, yourself as a brand, always have that self-reflection, right? Walk through your own identity system. Walk through like the specific things that you're putting out, your design, your logos, your this, your that, and just be a complete system. Because if you're missing on certain parts, I guarantee you people are noticing, in the same way that we notice it when a tattoo shop is dirty, when a coffee shop has weird cups. We notice these little things that at some point maybe aren't a big deal to us, or maybe they are, but at some point that's customers being lost or clients not taking us seriously. But anyway, I think that wraps it up. It's a good place to, end this. Any final comments from you guys?
I would just say, if anybody out there, business people or creatives that are listening, check out The Brand Gap by Marty Neumeyer.
Yes.
Great resource, great book. He's a genius, and it's something that I learned a lot from, not only on the future, but his book is great. And if you're looking to understand a little bit more of brand and brand identity, that's the place to go. That's the source. Or you could always just shoot us a message, and then we can have a conversation about it, because that's what we're here for, bringing value to creatives in the RGV, but also trying to help educate you guys if you need help or guidance.
Touching on that, you mentioned the future. Definitely somebody we appreciate. Christo and the future and everybody over there, Matthew Encina, Ben Burns, everybody that's doing all that work over there is just fantastic and amazing. Sure. I can't appreciate them enough. Ismail, any final words?
Stay golden.
Well, that's Creative Refresh. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it, and you guys have a good one. Give me that outro music.
Hit me.
That's the word. I'm leaving. That's it. I quit. There you go. I'm leaving this part in, by the way.